From the time of Homer's Iliad to Plato's Apologia, the portrayal of relationships between gods and humans had seemingly changed. Homer expressed the gods as physical beings that were mingling with humans, but by the time of Plato's Apologia, the origins of modern religion were beginning to form, and the gods were expressed as high beings whose actions were beyond all of human perception. I would like to begin this video essay by starting with Homer's Iliad and Odyssey. From there, we will discuss Aeschylus' Oresteia and Euripides' Bacchae. We will end with Plato's Symposium and Apologia, all while attempting to show how and why these relationships changed within the plots, as the Greek authors hypothesized regarding fate, aspiration, and eternal beings. The Iliad was written by Homer in the 8th century BCE. And within the Iliad, gods are not quite mortals, but they do have a physical presence within the storyline. Of course, there's the famous scene of Athena pulling Achilles' hair in line 197. But in the story, gods are emotional, passionate, and human-like in nature, despite their divine powers. For context of the story, the Trojan War is happening, and both the Achaeans and Trojans look to the gods for guidance and help. This is exemplified in scenes such as when Apollo helps Chryses by sending a plague upon the Trojans, and Zeus sends Agamemnon dreams of motivation. Sending a plague may not be the most morally fair act of justice, but in this poem we can't expect that from the holy beings. In the Iliad, gods aren't perfect. They are dysfunctional and make mistakes. They are emotional, which dictates some of their controversial actions. For example, Zeus often has poor judgment, with the burning of the ships and allowing people to die. He is even seduced by Hera, opening the door for Poseidon to assist the opposing war effort. This story makes clear that gods are capable of having human emotions, and they can make demigod children, such as Achilles, but their mingling with mortals drives the plot. One particular scene features the gods debating whether they should allow the war to continue or have it end. They initially hold off on it, but this prospect is interesting because we begin to see the superiority that the gods have in deciding fate for the mortals, which is explored throughout all of the texts that we'll be looking at. The second text we'll analyze is the Odyssey, also written by Homer. In the Odyssey, this builds upon the physical presence of gods expressed in the Iliad and their distinctive emotions and personalities. Although the gods can drive certain actions, good or bad, humans still have free will, and are thereby capable of causing their own destruction. In Book 1, Zeus remarks that, "The way these mortals blame the gods. From us alone, they say, come all their miseries, yes, but they themselves, with their own reckless ways, compound their pains beyond their proper share." The interactions between gods and humans with regard to fate create certain power dynamics which can and will contradict each other. For example, Poseidon banishes Odysseus from Ithaca, who ends up in the land of the Cyclops. This is where Odysseus kills Poseidon's son in order to stay alive, and from this point forward there is a constant rally between Odysseus' quest to return and divine intervention. This rally is further explored in the Oresteia, written in the 5th century BCE by Aeschylus, in which finds that this aspect of fate and death in relation to the gods' relationships with humans holds mortals accountable for their actions in the eyes of gods. In lines 176 through 178 of the Agamemnon, it is stated that Zeus, who guided men to think, has laid it down that wisdom comes alone through suffering. The act of creating a fresh blood guilt in order to wash old blood from the stained man, as mentioned in line 75 of the Agamemnon, is not conducive to divine power. Humans are to suffer, and justice might prevail, although taking it into your own hands isn't always the correct, free of sin way of doing things. In the Libation Bearers, the chorus states, "The spirit of right cries out aloud and extracts atonement due. Blood stroke for the stroke of blood shall be paid. Who acts shall endure. So speak the voice of the age-old wisdom." 70-75. The blood cycle is repeated upon generations, first with the titular character in the Agamemnon, who is avenged by his son Orestes in the Libation Bearers. Although they do have free will, as mentioned earlier, humans will still ask for divine intervention. However, the Oresteia presents one of the first accounts of true human responsibility for their actions. In the Eumenides, Orestes is helped by Apollo and Athena from dying in the name of revenge. He is tried in a court, which signifies there is a new sense of order which cannot be always carried out on a personal level. The theme of responsibility for one's actions and how it relates to justice in divine eyes is a main theme in the Bacchae as well. The Bacchae, written in 405 BC by Euripides, feature some of the origins of the mystery religions. Lines 392 to 394 state that far in the air of heaven, the sons of heaven live, but they watch the lives of men. The story tells the tale of the religious following through Pentheus, who bans the Thebans from following the teachings of Dionysus. This action becomes his downfall. In this way, Pentheus is much like Creon and Oedipus Rex, because both try to impose laws against God's wishes, which does not work out in the end. Dionysus principally destroys Pentheus for this, and it sends a strict message that if you don't follow God, you are left in pieces. Reversely, you are guaranteed the land of milk and honey if you follow Dionysus and live his teachings. Eternal paradise is offered after death if you are marked as a follower, much like the concept of heaven in Christianity. This is one of the first times this is introduced in Greek literature. The comparison of religions also applies to this distinction between being a fidel versus an infidel, a believer and non-believer within the story. Only the chosen ones can make it to the afterlife. Count all men hateful to you rather than the gods, it is said. And impiety is not key to achieving the holy realm in the next piece, Plato's Symposium. The Symposium was written in 360 BCE and is a series of speeches that discusses the empirical. An imperfect shadow is what humans see, but the true form is what gods see. This is almost like postmodernism, except for the fact that the true being, the truth, is really out there. Realms are permanent and eternal, but human beings are only temporary. Human creations, human things are also temporary. Love is the cosmic motivator in two forms. The first is the heavenly kind, agape, which is part of the ultimate goal. This ultimate good is achieved for love in the eternal realm and is communicated through philosophia. It is between worlds, and we continuously seek improvement for ourselves. The second kind of love is common, but it is lust. Plato's Apologia, which roughly translates to the afterword, is an appropriate ending to this history. It is a continuation of empirical meditation, but in the form of Socratic monologue. Being the first great communicator and educator. In this story, even someone as brilliant as Socrates admits he knows nothing when compared to God. As he says, "The difficulty, my friends, is not in avoiding death, but in avoiding unrighteousness, for that runs faster than death." This story grapples with something different. Humans have the godlike ability to reminisce about time, but not death. Gods decide our fate, as this is part of the divine force. Only God knows what death is, this migration of the soul to the unknown prospect, as mentioned on lines 75 and 76. This begs a question: what is after death? You could hypothesize in Ernest Becker's Denial of Death, which argues that religion was made to cope with the situation. However, for the first time, it is argued that heaven takes from Platonic idealism, and the concept of God in the afterlife can only transcend the true human experience. This is a far cry from the scenes of Athena pulling Achilles' hair in the Iliad. By the time of the Apologia, the conversation is about human perceptions and not the physical presence of God. This is the essence of philosophia, to communicate wisdom and knowledge, in this scenario to be transmitting to the divine entities. Socrates says, "For to fear death, my friends, is to only think ourselves wise without really being wise, for it is to think that we know what we do not know. For no one knows whether death may not be the greatest good that can happen to man." In the beginning of these texts, in the 8th century BCE, gods were once expressed as human-like in nature, but by this time, they have transcended to a holy being who we aspire to and who we can accompany in the realms of the afterlife. As the great Greek writers philosophized about wisdom, death, and paradise, their understandings and hypotheses immortalized in these texts would formulate the being of most religions, subsequently giving us a fundamental basis for our lives living in the West. Thank you.